I'm Brian V. at Whywework. Today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Krista Best. Krista Best is a research scientist. She is working at the Center for Interdisciplinary Research in Rehabilitation and Social Participation. She and I go way back, almost 3 decades. But she is someone that I wanted to speak with because she was in an inner circle with really cool people. But she always took it upon herself to study well and do well. And that I find amazing. So, for my listeners, when you think school is tough, you think you can't do it, you can't be something different than other people around you, have a listen to this young lady and see how she did it and find out some of her passions. Listen to Krista Best. I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work. And today I have the great pleasure of speaking to you today with Krista Best. Good evening, young lady.
Hello there, young man.
I truly appreciate you doing this. I reached out to you a few weeks ago now and mentioned you are doing some amazing things from what I see on the outside and things knowing from us growing up together. We were just saying almost 30 years ago.
No, 24. We said 24.
Well, seeing one another, but growing up
Okay.
and all of
Okay.
that
Yeah, you're
together,
right.
like this is decades ago. And then coming back decades later and seeing where our paths kind of diverged. And then it's interesting to find out what you were doing. Can you give a little introduction or just tell us a little bit what you're doing now?
Sure. So I am an assistant professor at University Laval, and I work in the rehabilitation department, which is in the Faculty of Medicine. But I'm not actually at the university that much. I have a very small teaching role. Most of my job is being a researcher at the Center for Interdisciplinary Research in Rehabilitation and Social Integration. There's a French name for that too, but I'm not going to try to do it because I'll butcher it today. So 95% of my job is a researcher in disability, mainly mobility and adapted physical activity.
I did a little introduction just before we went live or before you and I were speaking, and I tried to say your title, and I had to do a few retakes. It's a mouthful, whether it's in French or English.
Did you do it in French?
No.
Okay.
Maybe I'll go back and try. But Krista, thinking of where you are now as an associate professor, when did it all begin? So way back when, what was your first job? What was the very first thing that you did, maybe in middle school or maybe even
My
elementary school?
very first job was a cashier at Sobeys in Bedford, Nova Scotia.
How
Uh,
old were you?
16. I needed a job so I could afford gas to put gas in the car that my grandfather gave me.
What brought you to Bedford? We're from
Uh,
Sackville.
I know, but that's where the job was, so I went. You'll see this is a consistent theme in my life. I follow the work.
And that's a good theme to. Now, how long did you keep that job? From 16 until?
Oh, geez. Second year university, so that'd be 1998. I would have started in 16, maybe 3-4 years, 4 or 5 years.
So besides the money aspect, what got you out the door to get the job?
To get a different job?
No, in Sobeys, when you were 16.
Um, well, I wanted to start working. You build a reputation, you start to seek what you want to do and who you want to be. And mostly it was to get gas for the car.
So besides like the idea of wanting to work, you and I have many similar friends from middle school, and not all of us wanted to work at 16.
That's true. That's true.
So
In fact, my grandfather asked me not to work. He told me he could give me the allowance so I didn't have to work. He thought I was too young.
it's interesting. I've done a number of these interviews, and I'll say half of them, some people don't work until they're 20 something, but more North American idealism is working when you're younger. So it's good on your grandfather to offer you the money, but where did that motivation come to, not just the money, not just for the gas, but and not even, well, I guess the idea of wanting to get out there and getting experience, where did that push come from? Especially if your grandfather's not giving it to you.
That's true. Probably a lot my parents, I would say. My mom was a stay-at-home mom till my brother and I were both in school. And then she wanted to go back from work, and I could see her associate with, her sense of purpose. And not that our work necessarily defines us, but I think it becomes a large part of who we are. So I think I also wanted to have that sense of autonomy and independence and sense of purpose, that I was doing something and not, at 16, of course, your parents provide for you, but you want to have a sense that you can look after yourself too.
Krista, what I admire about you, one of the things I admire about you is how we did have some of the same friends and we did hang out in some of the same places, but you always kept, from my perspective, looking at you, a level head about you. You were level headed in that you were able to hang out with friends, but you always did very well in school. And obviously by your career that you chose, or it chose you, or however, wherever the work was, you were able to keep that level keel where many people that we know and that we hear about are unable. What was that driving force? Like, you did very well in, from my understanding of elementary school, middle school, high school, but you also had a social life. How did you do that? Because the listeners I have, just, younger high school students trying to find that balance and then wondering about the careers they can have. Some people in the career saying, well, I didn't do, I mean, you mentioned you're studying French, at our age. So I think there's, it's not too late to get into a groove, but how did you get in that groove so early?
To start, school was always important. My grades were always important. It was an intrinsic motivation, probably something hard to explain if you don't have it, but when you have it, it's, if you're motivated to do anything intrinsically, you do it because it was fun. I enjoyed learning. I also found it easy. If I went and paid attention, I could finish most of my work in school. And as you said, I had a social life, and that was also a really important aspect of my life. And I was never the first to leave a party, that's for sure, and most often among the last. It was just finding a balance. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with today, is the balance between, working or school or whatever it is for your responsibilities, but then also having the social aspect of life that's important. So I think the school part was intrinsic, and the social part is probably my extroverted ways.
It's interesting. You mentioned about, and I figured this out, I think maybe a little later or too late in life, of just going to class, just doing what's required of you. That is 70, maybe even 80% of the battle.
I
And
can tell you I did not do homework in high school. I rarely, maybe 5% of all the days we were in school, I had to do work outside of class. If you go to class, you listen, you pay attention, ask for help when you need it, you can leave and have your social life that starts at 3 p.m. and as late as your parents let you stay out.
and that's really important because I think some students like myself would feel discouraged. Well, I'm not getting it. Well, probably because I wasn't paying attention. And I remember when we were in high school, they started the rule, or where if you didn't miss class, then you didn't have to write your exams. I was like, okay,
Oh
I can,
yeah, I forgot about that.
and that was like the greatest thing since sliced bread for me. I was like, okay, no more missing classes because I don't have to write exams. But the exams weren't the major problem. The problem was I wasn't paying attention or going to class. And by
Hmm.
just going, you that's half of the battle, or even more
Yeah,
so.
yeah,
So,
exactly. And it changes in university, of course.
mhm.
Then you need to have motivation to get the grades. But when you pay for your education, it's a lot different than when it's
Oh, it's
provided
it's funny
by the
because
government.
that's where I realized I should just go to class and do was in university. So I was one step behind of what, and I didn't realize, oh yeah, I'm paying for this too. When did you, I'm living in Asia where we have parents that kind of dictate where their kids will go from the younger grades and then hopefully into university and even to their career. When did you start thinking about your career?
would say probably junior high. I remember talking to our grade 9 teacher, Mrs. Pattison. I don't know if you remember her.
Oh yeah, Mr. and
Um,
Mrs. Mr. Hey, I can't reach it.
exactly.
I can't reach it, but I
The
have a
two
stick.
of them.
I have a
Yeah.
stick.
Well, I'm miles and miles away for you, so I'm safe. You fall asleep on the table, you know you're
No, no,
getting
but
it.
it's such a useful thing. No, no, he never. I don't think he hit anyone. Did he?
No, but he would hit the desk so
Eh,
hard that everyone would wake up because he would slap the desk so hard that it made such a noise.
or his cowboy boots.
Or his cowboy boots, yeah, and his beard.
Yeah.
But
I
his
remember.
wife taught science, Mrs.
Yes.
Pattison,
Yeah.
and I remember chatting with her about science, and I found science interesting, and I was curious, and that's probably why I'm a researcher today, because I always had questions. And at that point, I thought something medical, maybe med school, maybe physio, and so I always had that in my mind as I went through high school.
So with med school versus physio, was there a reason for choosing physio? Getting into that, was there an experience, or just it just seemed interesting at the time?
And in the end, I went kinesiology. I
Nice.
decided to go the kinesiology route. It was a new program, and I was interested about it, interested in physical activity. But the reason why I didn't choose med school is because based on my looking into what you needed to do, I realized you couldn't have a social life.
Mm-hmm.
And that was still a really important part for me. So I felt I could do a health professional degree and still have a social life, but med school seemed like it was too much, that I wouldn't be able to maintain that social life that I know I love and need.
So from kinesiology into rehabilitation and being a researcher, how did that come about?
I went through undergrad, started off with Bachelor of Science,
Yeah.
still with the thinking about physio, and learned a bit more about kinesiology. And when the Sackville Sports Stadium became a popular hangout place, and I
Mm-hmm.
started going there and hanging out, I got more and more interested in exercise and
Yeah.
physical activity. And so that's what made me choose kines. And with the Bachelor of Science in kinesiology, there are, of course, some options, but not the same options that I wanted. So the next a lot of it was chance and circumstance and meeting the right professors who suggested different options for me. And I was interested in helping people either preventatively avoid sickness or
Mm-hmm.
to get better afterwards. So that's when I left my first job at Sobeys and when I started in kinesiology my second year at university, because I wanted to work in the gym. And I worked with a man who had a spinal cord injury, and at the time I had no idea what I was doing, but I learned a lot. I found the information I needed and consulted with some physios and other professionals in rehab to be able to be a personal trainer for him. And that's what struck the nerve for me in rehab. That, and my mom had a friend who had MS, multiple sclerosis, when
Yeah.
I was a kid, and I used to love playing with it in her wheelchair when I was a kid. So it was kind of a mixture of those things.
So then that experience directed you towards your graduate work.
Exactly. So then I decided, well, I'm going to do a master's and then figure it out, because wasn't a lot of clinical practice options for kinesiology. It's not a professionally certified degree, so it's not like becoming an OT or a PT where you get a certifiable profession at the end. It was a lot of carving your own way as a kinesiologist 20 years ago or
Yeah.
25 years ago. But as I got into research, I learned that I liked it more and more. And of course, the academic path is not an easy one nor a short one. So after the
Mm.
master's, it was a PhD, but I had a gap in between the two of 7 years when I taught at Dal. One of my goals was to be a teacher, not a teacher, but a professor,
Mm-hmm.
and teach in kinesiology and teach in rehabilitation. And there was a couple of opportunities that presented themselves. I had one professor who retired, who taught the adapted physical activity course that I really was interested in and wanted to teach. And another professor, Stephen Chung, who is at Waterloo right now, I believe. He unfortunately experienced a bad accident and was unable to teach his introduction to kinesiology course as I was finishing my master's. So it opened up a door to apply to be a sessional instructor, which I did not do for the money. I think they paid something like $4,000 per course that you taught at that time. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't for the salary.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got engaged in the university and ended up getting a teaching contract, a sessional lecturer contract for 1 year and then a 2-year contract. And then I did another year kind of filling in as a sessional. And then I decided, no, it's time for a PhD.
And how long did that take you to do your PhD? That's a
The
whole.
PhD, first I had to decide where I was going to go. And I, one day, not one day, it took me a few more days, but wrote a grant to the SSHRC. It's the Social Sciences Humanity Research Council in Canada, one of the tri-council agencies. So I just, had some ideas and I put them on paper and submitted it and ended up getting funding. I got 4 years of funding. I believe it was $80,000 for 4 years to go do a PhD. I consulted with, her name is Claudia Ems. She's a researcher in adapted physical activity at University of Calgary. We talked about different project ideas. She accepted that I would apply. I was in the process of doing that and ran into an old friend who was a occupational therapist at the Nova Scotia Rehab Center when I was doing my master's there. She said, no, don't go to Calgary, come to BC, UBC, you'll work with, the supervisor that I have, Bill Miller, and, we'll work in, he does lots of work in wheelchair research. And that was my master's, was a wheelchair skills training program. He has a great team and it's Vancouver. You can, the mountains are here, you can ski, there's ocean, forget about Calgary. So of course I chatted with him and I said, if I'm going to go to Calgary, I might as well go to UBC.
Mm-hmm.
So the PhD took 4 years, 2009 to 2014, 5 years.
So sorry for myself included that may not understand. For you to get grant money of 80,000, does that cover even your personal expenses and everything that you need for those years?
Living in the province of British Columbia and Vancouver specifically, absolutely not. You're looking at rent of, I don't know what it costs. When I first moved there, I think it was $1,100 a month for rent.
So how do you manage that? What are you able to do on the side, or how
You
else?
apply for more bursaries, more
Is that
grants.
how it works?
That's how it works. You also accrue a bit of student loans
Mm-hmm.
that you hope that you're going to get a good job to pay off later. Luckily for me, it panned out that way, that I got the good job later. But jobs aren't easy to get in academia, and they're getting harder and harder.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really fortunate to
How
get the
long
job I have now.
how long did you stay in BC?
I stayed there until 2014,
Okay.
and then I started a postdoc. So a postdoc is such a weird phase in your life because you're
Mm-hmm.
not a student and you're not an employee.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like this freelance researcher, which is fun because you have a lot of freedom and flexibility of where to go. And I was invited to do 1 year at University of Laval, which is really funny because I don't speak French. But I had a colleague here, Francois Routhier, who's still a mentor and a really close colleague today. And I worked with him since, we worked on the same team. When I did my master's, he was doing his postdoc.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't talk to each other for some years. And then when I did my PhD, I invited him to be on my supervisory committee. So after the PhD, he invited me to apply for a postdoc at CIRRUS. CIRRUS is the abbreviation for the long name I told you.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied, I got it. And if I tell you the salary of the first year of a postdoc, probably I'll turn everybody away from academia.
Never come.
$30,000 was the
For
annual salary for
after all of this,
after PhD.
right? You're talking for, what's this, 14, almost 20 years after high school
Yeah.
of education.
The good thing is I was moving to Quebec City, where rent is much, much cheaper than Vancouver.
Yeah.
And the other good thing is with a good CV, you can apply for more grants. And I did end up getting more grants, but it's a risk you take. You don't do research for the money, as I said.
Along this path you've had before getting your present position, did you feel any time of discouragement, uncertainty? How did you wade through that?
How many times? You want to know how many times? That I've lost count of. I specifically remember twice during my PhD Googling, should I quit my PhD? So that's how I waded through it. I consulted good old Google. And actually, I got a lot of support for quitting.
You'll find lots on there, yeah.
Yeah, but no, quitting is never the answer. It just makes you feel good to know that you'd be supported either way. But
Yeah.
no, it's taking a step back and finding something that you love to do, and chat with your friends about it, your colleagues. And one thing that helped me get through almost all the challenging situations is these crazy to-do lists that, you wake up in the morning and you feel like you have so much to do. It's unsurmountable. There's no way you'll ever complete it. And you write yourself a to-do list and you say, okay,
Mhm.
if I can just check a few things off, and then you do something random on the side, or maybe three things, but you add them to your to-do list.
You can't read it, but mine has to
Exactly.
do is here.
Look at this. This is every day. These notebooks, it
Oh,
just, wrong way. It's
oh, you keep
endless,
it in one
endless
book?
of
That's a good idea. I usually just keep mine and I like to throw it away when it's done.
same, but then I lose them. That's the problem. And I have important notes.
So
I
in
know. So just getting that kind of affirmation that what you're doing is working, and that you are doing a good job, and that you can do it. And I
so
guess
in
that's
your
how you wait through.
present position, what is it you do, or how did that come about? And what is it you do each day, or what does your typical week look like in your work?
I don't have a typical week or a typical day. It changes all the time. Um, so research, it's a bunch of different things. And what's interesting about my job as a researcher now, being a new investigator, so you're considered a new investigator for 5 years, is that you do very little of what you've been training to do for the last 10 years. So I'm not interviewing or collecting data with participants anymore. I'm not developing these cool new interventions anymore. At least I'm not doing that legwork. Now I'm helping students manage and come up with their project ideas, and writing grants and finding money to support the research we want to do. And right now I have 4 PhD students, 2 master's students, and a postdoc fellow, and then co-supervising some others with other colleagues. But what we do is help them to find success in what they want to do, and help them achieve their research goals and their academic or clinical or life goals, whatever they may be. So day to day in COVID-19 times, it's meetings. It's way too many meetings. It's starting at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and helping students organize or meeting with research teams to either manage ongoing projects or create new project ideas that are worthy of getting more dollars from different funding organizations.
Krista, what would be the reasoning for them to have you do that opposed to what you were doing in the last 10 years to go back and to help these students? There must be a reason for it. So what would that be?
It's not that they have you do it. It's when you're a student yourself, you have a research project,
Mm-hmm.
and your project is to, come up with the research question and find a way to answer that question. The whole scientific method, and it's the same as what we learned in high school. It's all still the same method,
Mm-hmm.
and help them get to answer their question through scientific writing. So, as a researcher, our goal is to build a program of research. So I said my program of research is in mobility and adapted physical activity. So now it's not just one project. Now we want to build a whole program. So we have many projects that are related in different areas. And for me, my goal is to improve mobility and accessibility, inclusion, social participation for people. And so by having multiple students on various projects, I reach that goal, which is my research goal. But then I also help to train the next generation of
Mm.
academics or clinicians, or the different students we have come through.
I guess I was wondering, does that help you in your understanding to build a solid foundation of looking at the perspective of what you were living for the last 10 years as the student and the learner, and then giving you the perspective of how they see as you move forward in your career?
Yes, but they don't. I mean, we engage them a little bit in writing grants and
Mm-hmm.
helping to put together protocols. And of course, they do parts of it as their own research work. But it's really interesting when you get an academic position, because you all of a sudden have these new roles that you've never really been trained
Mm.
to do, like managing budgets and managing human resources, and getting contracts organized with the research center, and getting students enrolled in graduate programs. So it's a bit of a different role, but still to achieve the same end.
Even though your role or your week is never really the same, excuse me, what is most difficult about what you do now?
Actually, one thing I didn't say was about the conferencing. That is a big role of a researcher, disseminating your work. So it's, attending conferences and writing manuscripts and presenting. Of course, in COVID-19 times, all of that's kind of been slowed down, or even conferences have been put on hold. So what is most demanding? I, I don't know that I find it demanding. I don't know that, I mean,
Mhm.
it's challenging.
Well, yeah, the
It's,
challenging, some people say with scheduling and those sorts of things, like it's not maybe taxing on you
mhm.
mentally, but just there's something, in your position of so much education, and then you find, just this one thing is kind of maybe annoying or disheartening.
I'll say that in a research center, I have support that probably a lot of people don't have,
Hmm.
like somebody who helps manage the human resources. I have
Hmm.
people, I know three people who work in managing our financial, helping us manage our budget. So, and all the things that I said I have to do that are new roles, I have a lot of support to do them. So while they are challenging for me, I have
Hmm.
lots of support
Support.
there. So I'd say, those new roles are definitely challenging. We
Mhm.
mentioned French, having to have these meetings in French 80% of the time. That's definitely a challenge. Sometimes I think maybe that's it. That's probably the biggest challenge, is sometimes not 100% understanding the conversation. So it's getting better and better every day. But one of the things I like about research is being able to contribute conceptually to ideas and to help projects grow and achieve their goals. When you do it in a different language, it's difficult. It's definitely a different story.
I can attest to that. I live in South Korea where 80% of my life is misunderstood. Even yesterday, I think my dear wife was speaking to her sister, and I got part of the conversation. I said, "Oh, so you guys are going to do this?" And like, no, we're not even talking about you. So like, it just completely went over my head, and it
Are
can be
you? Have you
frustrating, right?
learned?
I
Have
I
you learned?
I have enough to know when I'm
Good.
being maybe sometimes talked to or not, a little bit.
Well, that's good.
I think I'm more stubborn. It's not a requirement. So you have that other motivation for it's for your job. It would help me. I think I'm still trying to learn English.
It's yeah, that's definitely a challenge. That I mean, yeah, I knew it when I came. I accepted it, and being in a new role, a new position, and as a new investigator, part of the stress on you is needing to succeed, because just because you get a new investigator position doesn't mean you're going to keep it. You need to secure your program of research and secure funding, and secure tenure in the university, which is next step. So
What is this something that brings you most satisfaction in what you're doing, even over the years before getting this position? What is bringing, because I know you have a love for animals, you're in rehabilitation, like those things you're helping, like you're helping animals, you're helping people, and I can see there's lots of times where you can just have those, this is, so if you do get discouraged, you look at some of the cases you're dealing with, and you like that would give you a renewed sense of hope in what you're doing. But what brings you satisfaction in what you do?
for me, actually, my colleague asked me this last year. We were in Bologna in Italy at a conference, and we were talking about why we do this job. And of course, we were laughing a little bit because we were in Italy at the time and just came from a nice museum and had this amazing dinner. And of course, that's a perk of what we do.
Yeah.
But the side that people don't see is, the number of hours that we do put in, the number of grants you apply for and don't get.
Mm.
Um, I definitely don't do it for the money. Our research gets funded, and that's great. We have the money we need to see the projects go through. But the reason I do it is at the end of a project, or the day. I'll say the day just for a overall caption to state. It's when people come to you and they say, you've made a difference in my life. I have a couple of examples. I did for my PhD a peer-led wheelchair skills training program. And one of the things in research, especially clinical research, is getting evidence that's robust and will be held highly in the scientific community. So a lot
Hmm.
of times they push for randomized controlled trials, which are, controlled trials having two groups to make sure that what you're saying, an intervention you're testing whether it's effective or not, and that has a lot of weight, and you're most likely to get funded for those projects. But for me, that's never been the importance, what the numbers say. For me, it's having that more qualitative aspect or subjective aspect of people's experiences. And so this particular project, my PhD, I was talking about the peer-led wheelchair skills training program. A woman came to me and she had taken the program, and I did the interview with her 6 months or so after she finished the intervention. And she said, thank you so much. You gave me my life back. And for me, it was just a really heartwarming feeling,
Yeah.
because I didn't care about the randomized control trial of 100 people. I cared about that one person who could then go on, and she went from not being able to leave her apartment alone, that her husband was doing everything for her, to being able to go out and get groceries on her own, and prepare a meal for the both of them, to traveling. She traveled from Canada to Europe afterwards and was teaching other people how to do skills in their wheelchair. So it's partially that. I work with another peer now here in Quebec, and he's involved in many projects. And he always thanks me for having confidence in him, because I ask him to get involved in a lot of our projects. But for me, it's involving the people who this work is for into the
Yeah.
projects, and then seeing that it often, sometimes, most of the time, makes a difference. So I'd say that's why I do it.
And you could probably see that even when you read other journals and stuff, how the impact is with other researchers in their work as well. So that's an encouraging way. It's like listening to teachers, right, who impact other students. And it may not always happen to you, but if you're looking for encouragement, you can look out in the scientific community and find all of that quite often.
Exactly. And then there's the competitive side of me too, that when you have a successful program of research that's funded, you didn't it's not a sign that you're a really good grant writer. It's a sign that well, maybe that is the sign. For me, that's
Hmm.
not necessarily it. It's that I've written so many and I've revised them so many times. So for the few that I have, I've probably written 15, and it's that sense of competition and wanting to get it and striving to do more. And that probably speaks back to when I was in school. I always wanted the best grade.
Krista, right now, in your position, what would you like? Because not everyone understands what you're talking about. Maybe some people don't even care, and they just, if they have a relative who's in a wheelchair, they just want them better. They're not
Mhm.
really caring about the scientific portion of it or the research that goes into it or the grants. What would you like someone to understand about your role that they may not get that perspective elsewhere? Just so that they understand maybe the grind of it, but just something they may not understand that you would like someone to understand about what you do.
I think a lot of times people have an idea of who professors are, who researchers are. And I know I hear it a lot, and I used to hear it from my family. You're not like them, or you don't seem like them, and them being the scientists and
Hmm.
the professors in the academic world. We're all just humans. We make mistakes. We make mistakes every day. Sometimes we don't do things the exact right way. I still get up and, some mornings ask myself, am I doing it right? Should I be doing something different? So it's just reflecting on what you've done and what you know and the resources you have, the support you have to keep going forward. And I think that's the way through. If you asked me about wading through earlier, I think that's a way to wade through. And us academics, who probably a lot of the population, from what I hear from friends and colleagues, sometimes think are in this different world. We're not. We're all in the same world.
That shows great humility, and it's a good understanding, good perspective from you to share, to say we're just, and because we need to be reminded. There's many things that we need. I mean, we have to-do lists. We know things we have to do, but it's good to be reminded that there are people out there that think that we're just the same, opposed to what you might see in the news or on TV. this scientific research community that lives in a bubble far and beyond and untouchable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any advice? So the listeners here, I'm talking not only in research, obviously with my limited ability and understanding, but people that, the elementary school, middle school, high school student, the Krista looking into getting into, could be science, someone that's working, that's going through these times, and they're looking for a new career. Is there any advice that you have for them that may help them and encourage them in their work?
One piece of advice that I often give my students is to never stop asking questions, including why not you. A lot of people will say, well, I don't have this, or I don't have that, or do I, why could it be me? But
Mhm.
the truth is, no matter what their goals are, it can always be. And I think by never stopping to ask questions, which I guess is really true to my job, my role,
Yeah,
you can always find more answers. The more answers you have, the more information you have, the more informed you are to make decisions about what is best for you. And if you go down one track and you think it's what you want to do, and then you realize, actually, no, this isn't what I want to do, don't be afraid to just keep asking more questions and go a different route. And this is a bit cliche, but life's certainly not a straight trajectory. It's all over the place. And in between all of this, I've traveled a lot. I've chased different dreams to different continents. I've lived in during a PhD and postdoc, lived in 3 countries. I was in Norway for a while, in Italy for a while, and in Canada, 3 Canadian cities. So although you see this, a lot of people perceive this linear trajectory for us scientific folk, that's not the way it is. And
hmm,
so don't let any preconceived mold fit or let you decide or decide for you what you want to be. Just dream big and ask questions.
that's a great point as well. It seems like just if you didn't say that, it would seem like you had that linear path. Okay, I'm going to go here and here and here and here, but you pursued other things. And that's where I think some people get discouraged because they think it has to be linear. And
Mm-hmm.
from most people that I've met, whether it's their personal lives or professional, it's never linear. It's never
Mm-mm.
going from point A to B and then they're all done. There's this wandering path that takes us through life.
And that comes from taking opportunities, even though those opportunities, when I had an opportunity to move to Norway, that was not in line with what a soon to be graduating PhD should do, thinking about a postdoc in Quebec. And I did it from a distance mostly. It was
Mhm.
personal reasons I wanted to move there, and I just did it and found a way to make it work. So take opportunities.
Krista, well, first, how can people reach you? I think you have something on LinkedIn as well. If people want to talk to you about, a young Krista wanting to get into rehabilitation and research, is there a way that people can reach out to you?
I am horrible on LinkedIn. I think it probably still says I'm a postdoc. I don't know the last time I've opened it. You can reach out to me through there. I probably will check it eventually, but it won't get the quickest reply. Um, if you type my name at University of Laval, my email
Mm,
comes up. That's probably the safest bet.
that's right.
I have a little bit of a social media presence. Not huge, as you said. It showcases my love for dogs and a little bit of disability advocacy. um those email is always the best way. If somebody wants to chat with me, I'm more of a personable person, I'd say, than behind a LinkedIn profile, because I don't access them. I don't use them.
Krista, how do you rest? So you mentioned some of the divergence through your academic career. What do you do to rest?
Rest as in sleep.
And well, just sleep is good, but anything. What do you do to take a break from your work?
Instead of saying rest, I'll call it re-energizing.
Yeah, yeah.
I stay active.
Hmm.
Running is one of the things that re-energizes me, which is really contradictory to what you said, rest.
Hmm.
I travel. I travel a lot. In a year I maybe visit 5 or 6 different countries, mostly for work, and a
Hmm.
couple of times a year for personal reasons. I also keep in touch with my family and friends. I talk to them regularly. For me, those are really energizing and important things.
Very good. Is there anything else? I have a couple more questions, but is there anything else you'd like to add? The, the second to last question I have is, how has work shaped your character? How has it helped define who you are?
How has work helped define who I am? Or did I define who I
Yeah,
am through work?
that's true.
Hmm. I think it's a bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had this always altruistic, looking back to the personal trainer job that I had, and
Mm-hmm.
this man came in with a spinal cord injury, knowing I had no idea what I was doing. I wanted to learn to find a way to help him be better. He's a great story, actually. He came in quite a bit overweight, couldn't transfer
Mm-hmm.
independently from bed to wheelchair, for example, or into his car. He was mostly in a power chair because he just felt using a manual chair was too difficult, despite he had full use of his upper limbs. Through training with him, 8 or 9 months, he lost about 80 pounds ballpark. And then he could use his manual chair. He could get up out of bed every day independently. So for me, that's the other, seeing that you're making a difference, although that wasn't research, that was something totally aside.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess the altruism in me, that intrinsic motivation to help, probably led me down the road that I've taken. How my work has shaped me now, I say yes to too much. That's probably
Mm-hmm.
why I was always at the parties and still going to school, because I'm a person of my word when I can
Couldn't
be, which is
couldn't
all the
say
time.
no. Couldn't say no.
Exactly. Couldn't say no. That's the problem. It's still the problem. It's why when you say rest, I chuckle a little bit, because most nights, and this is all from when I was a kid too.
Yeah.
5-6 hours sleep a night is what I've always lived on. So it's okay. Um, but I guess that's it, is always getting excited about new opportunities and new ideas, and having this altruistic or intrinsic motivation to help people. Um, that's probably shaped who I am in my job, and then that's how who I am actually led me to have the job that I have. So I guess I shaped my own role as well.
You fit into it well. I mean, I talked to someone the other day, and they had a mind to do what they do, but then they realized they lacked the heart. And I think then he began to find that balance to love the people that he's doing it for. And I think that you're exemplifying what you're doing, because it's without a love for doing what you're doing, then you're going to miss the point, and people will get it. And I think that you do have a love for what you're doing, and I do appreciate it. And one more question, Krista Best. Why do you work?
Oh, you saved the hardest question for last.
Why
Why
do
do I
you
work?
work?
Oh, there's the obvious reasons.
Mhm.
We all need a vocation.
But do you know what? That's an obvious, but that's like saying when we're younger, we need to get a job, but many kids, many adults don't get that, right? They think a lot of things are free, and to pay for these things, someone else will do it for them. So I think it's important, even though it's obvious to those that know it, it's not so obvious to those that do not.
True. Okay. So I guess that's
It's
what
good.
drives us
And
to
it's a
start
good,
work.
yeah.
That's what drives us to start. If I'm going to do something 40%, I don't know how many hours you work in a week, 40 hours a week, however much percent that is your time,
Hmm.
which isn't what you do in research. As you know, being in the academic world yourself, it's always a lot more hours than we think it will be. Um, so you do it for having a means to live, I
Hmm.
guess,
Yeah.
to start. But for me, finding work that you love to do that doesn't always feel like work is the key. So why I work in general is to be able to be independent and have, yeah, I guess you're right, not everybody does have to work. I'm
No,
backing up
they
because,
don't. They don't.
yeah, you're right.
And it's
For me, I have to. I've always, for me, to fulfill something that's like this innate need for me, or an intrinsic motivation for myself, I need to have that for myself, for a sense of purpose. Maybe
That's
that's it. Maybe that's a good way to say it, is a sense of purpose.
It's good. I mean, that's why I started this podcast, because I know there are people that don't know that. And not only do people not know it, they need to be reminded of it. Why am I doing it? And well, look around. You have family or you have desires and needs. Well, it's not free. So you have to get out there and work. And hopefully you find a passion or your passion and you're able to apply it in your work.
Yeah, you're right. It's a sense of purpose, and to afford all the things I love to do, the traveling, the seasons passes at Whistler when I was a student out there, and those are things you can't do without a job. Having a car, all the luxury things that I guess I take for granted right now because
Mm-hmm.
I have them. But even having dogs cost money.
Yeah.
If I want to have dogs, I need to feed them.
And as you mentioned, when you have people come up to you and say, in the work that you're doing, you're changing people's lives, that that is a side benefit. You're doing the research and hoping to get to that point, but that is what you've shaped yourself into being, is someone that is able to help. And I'm sure that is a driving force as well.
I think you're right. It's actually nice to reflect on that question. Why I work.
Perfect. Well, Krista Best, I think you're doing a great job in your work. And I hope you all the
Thanks,
best in your
Brian.
research and with your postgrad students and helping them. I'm sure you would be a great asset to have in their corner, to be an encouragement and to remind them why they're doing what they're doing. And I hope you all the best in the future.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for reaching out and chatting with me. And it's great to see you and catch up after this many years. So good luck with your Why We Work, and I look forward to listening to your future podcast. Although not myself, because I still don't like listening to myself talk on recording.
Oh, well, I'll send it and you can listen anyway, though, just for the sake. Thank you very much, Krista Best, and all of your
Thanks,
work.
Brian.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.